Christian McCaffrey should have won the Heisman Trophy in 2015. I have stated this several times. If you want my full explanation of why, you can find that in a number of videos on Mark Rogers TV. Christian McCaffrey is going to be a better player in 2016. I'm not saying that, but that's what David Shaw is saying at Stanford. We bring in Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree. Nick, it seems like an impossible mission this season. We're talking about the kid that broke Barry Sanders' all-time record for yardage in one season, caught 41 passes, threw a couple touchdown passes, did everything you could possibly ask the kid to do. Actually handled the ball like 60 or 80 times more than Derrick Henry, who did win the Heisman Trophy, but he's going to be better this year.
It seems improbable, I would say. I don't want to rule it out. Now, Shaw was quick to clarify that he did not mean his stats necessarily were going to be better. A lot of those stats are very much a result of how well your team's doing, how well your O-line's doing in particular, and the play calls. What he meant is that in 2015, when he broke Barry Sanders' record, when he did all these amazing things, he was quick to point out that he wasn't fully developed physically. He's still growing. The kid was 20 years old. So he's still adding muscle, gaining speed and strength. He was also very quick to point out that McCaffrey did not really know the playbook in 2015, which on the one hand is horrifying, but I guess not that unexpected. Shaw has one of the most complicated playbooks out there in all of college football. So a lot of guys don't know it in their first 2 years. So this season, what Shaw is saying is that maybe the stats won't be better. That seems certainly improbable, but I guess possible. What he meant is that he's going to know where his blockers are going to be this year. He's going to know where his guys are headed. He's going to know how to set up plays. Last year was just get the guy the ball in space and let him go. And that worked pretty well. But now he's going to actually know the playbook. He's going to be able to step up. So a lot of these concerns about what do they do without Kevin Hogan, the guy who's pulling the strings and knew where everyone's going to be, McCaffrey's going to know that a lot more this year. So he's going to be stronger. He's probably going to be faster, and he's going to be smarter. That's what David Shaw was alluding to when he said, or not alluding, was saying explicitly that Christian McCaffrey will be better this season.
I rely on my brain a little bit too much for stats, and it usually doesn't fail me. But I was off by 4 receptions. I shorted Christian 4 catches, 45 instead of 41. But what's interesting about last season, as ridiculous as the numbers turned out to be in the conclusion, against Northwestern, he only had 12 carries for 66 yards. So he had a good game, but they only gave him the ball 12 times. And then the next week against a bad Central Florida team, 20 carries for 58 yards. So he didn't get off to a great start. And then he took off against USC for 115, but that's not a ridiculous game, 26 for 115. It was really after that, it was game 4 and on that the numbers just exploded. So maybe he's got a shot at matching those numbers, but certainly the point is well taken that you can be a better player. You can fit your role better and do a lot of things that won't necessarily show up on the stat sheet, but will help the team and still be a better player.
What I am really excited about is not that just he's a better player. It's that I think the offensive coaching staff has a better understanding now of how to use him. You go back, you alluded to those first 6 quarters of Stanford season when they were god-awful against Northwestern, and the first 2 quarters against UCF, Stanford was bad. They didn't really do anything. Those first 6 quarters, they were bad. And then you go back the year before, 2014, when they lost 5 games. They kept trying to play like they had a Toby Gerhart when they didn't have Toby Gerhart. And once they started to realize, hey, we got some fast guys who can do some cool stuff. We don't just need to move a sea of bodies 15 feet at a time. That's when things really started to open up. So what I'm really excited to see about is the coaching staff sort of learning and knowing how to use these guys, how to properly get the right offensive line mix because they're bringing in 3 new starters there. So that's what I'm excited about is Bloomgren and Shaw both knowing full well how to use McCaffrey, learning how to utilize guys like Bryce Love and Michael Rector, and getting all of them in the game rather than trying to play that classic old school Stanford, send Gerhart up the middle and crush some skulls. Once they started opening that playbook up and doing more of those things, McCaffrey and Stanford, they just took off, and they were putting up 40-plus a game. I think they averaged 38 points for the season, which was up until last year is very un-Stanford-like. So that's, I think the piece we're missing here. We all know McCaffrey's good, but I'm really excited to see the coaching staff, how they progressed and evolved beyond 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So I think that if he's going to break any of his records that he set or beat the stats he had, I think that's where it's going to be key, is the coaching staff using him wisely. And it sounds like they are, so very exciting times for him.
You know what allows him possibly to break records, but also not to break records at the same time, depending on how you look at it, is the strength of the schedule. Because on one hand, they play such a good schedule. So this season, I was trying to pull it up here, but I know that they conclude with Rice, which I think is the worst scheduling move in the history of the Pac-12. Yes. But anyway, Stanford and Rice for the final game of the season. But before that, it's Kansas State and Notre Dame are the 2 out-of-conference games. And because the conference is so strong, it's not like you got 3 bad teams that you can beat up on, and McCaffrey can be taken out late in the first half because you're up 35-0. If you look at the games last year, they didn't win a whole lot of nail-biters, but they were always competitive games that they played throughout the Pac-12, and then they play again such a difficult non-conference slate, Kansas State and Notre Dame this year, that that keeps him in the games to keep playing, but the opponents are difficult, so he's not going to just run ragged through about a lot of bad defenses. So that's a pros and cons in terms of the numbers.
Very true. And I think also it's not only just tough teams, but tough teams that score a lot of points but aren't necessarily known for their defense. I'm thinking Oregon in particular last year, Washington State, Cal, of course, could put up a lot of points, but, not so much on defense. So a lot of teams that they're going to have to keep scoring on that aren't necessarily going to have the best game plan in the world to stop McCaffrey. So I think, to your point, there's a lot of opportunity there. So that's pretty exciting as well. But the Pac-12 North in general, I think, is going to be brutal. I think it's going to make a run for one of the best divisions in college football. I don't think they're going to beat the SEC West, certainly, but I think it's going to be very hyper competitive. It really is. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for him to finally start getting some recognition and have Heisman voters watching him in September. When he's got these big marquee games like Washington, Notre Dame, all these teams. So that's exciting to think about.
Yeah, if they could boot Oregon State and possibly make a trade with the South, then maybe they've got a chance to rival the SEC West. But
get the LA schools up in the North, drop Oregon State and somebody else. I don't know. I guess Cal. Then, maybe. But it's going to be hyper competitive. Already people are talking about Washington, Stanford, Oregon, Washington State, all with a legit chance to take the division. So it's going to be a wild year out west. Pac-12 after dark, I believe they call it. It's going to be fun. Yeah,
I really like this Washington team. I think they could be a sleeper nationally.
Yeah. That's if they learn how to win games, I absolutely agree. I think the Huskies could make a run at it for sure.
All right, Christian McCaffrey, better in 2016. We heard it from David Shaw, then we heard the explanation from Nick Dempsey from Rule of Tree. Nick, it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely, Mark, anytime.